Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where power isn't just measured by armies, wealth, or influence. It's measured by what a nation can build behind closed doors, beneath mountains, deep underground. And when those constructions involve uranium, plutonium, and centrifuges spinning day and night, the world holds its breath, because the line between peace and devastation is razor thin. Now let's talk about Iran's nuclear program. A name, a place, a project that echoes in headlines, summits, emergency meetings, and whispered conversations among world leaders. Why? Because this isn't just about a country wanting energy. This is about fear, mistrust, survival, and yes, ambition. See, when a nation says it's enriching uranium for peaceful purposes, yet it hides facilities and resists full inspections, people get nervous. Transparency is the language of trust, but opacity, that's the shadow where suspicion grows. Iran claims its nuclear efforts are for medicine, for electricity, for progress, and maybe that's true. But why then does the world react with sanctions, military drills, and midnight negotiations that stretch on for years? Because the same technology that powers a hospital can, if redirected, level a city. That's the dilemma. That's the controversy. History plays a heavy role. Decades of tension, revolutions, broken treaties, and fiery rhetoric have laid a foundation of skepticism. And when you add the voices of regional rivals, global superpowers, and international watchdogs shouting across the same table, compromise starts to look like a long and winding road, one with landmines. It's not just about Iran. It's about what it represents. A nuclear Iran challenges the balance of power in the Middle East. It could spark an arms race. It could embolden hardliners, silence moderates, and put unimaginable force in the hands of those who don't always play by the rule. People fear what they don't understand, but they fear even more what they suspect is being hidden. That's why there's controversy. Because behind every document signed, there's a question not fully answered. Behind every promise, there's a doubt not fully extinguished. And yet, let's be honest, this story isn't just about one country. It's about the whole world struggling to define what peace really means. Is it control? Is it compromise? Is it mutual respect? Or mutual deterrence? At its core, the Iran nuclear issue challenges us all to confront how we deal with trust in a world shaped by betrayal, how we balance national pride with global safety, how we handle the silent threat that can travel faster than diplomacy and strike harder than any war before. So yes, it's controversial, because when nuclear power enters the room, so does history, fear, pride, and politics. And in that volatile mix, every move matters. This isn't just a debate for experts in suits or generals in strategy rooms. It's a conversation the world must keep having loudly, clearly, and urgently, because one wrong calculation, and it's not just controversy we'll be talking about, it's consequence. Lack of transparency fuels global mistrust and suspicion. When a nation develops a nuclear program, the world watches closely, especially when that nation has a history of strained international relations. The heart of the controversy surrounding Iran's nuclear ambitions lies in the persistent lack of transparency. Nuclear technology is not inherently a threat. It can power homes, provide life, saving medical treatments, and support scientific advancement. But the same technology, when hidden or only partially disclosed, sends a message that echoes louder than any official statement. It says there might be something we're not supposed to see. That possibility, even if unproven, is enough to shift global perspectives from caution to fear. Iran's repeated delays in allowing full inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency have played a significant role in shaping this perception. When inspectors are denied access to certain sites or are only granted limited oversight, The assumption becomes that there's something worth hiding. Whether or not that assumption holds truth is less important than the fact that it exists. Perception becomes reality in international diplomacy, and the perception of secrecy has become a powerful fuel for mistrust. This is not an isolated problem. It's compounded by past incidents, missed deadlines, and declarations that often contradict independent findings. When a government says one thing, but intelligence from other nations suggests another, the gap between words and actions grows wider, and suspicion settles in. The lack of transparency also makes negotiations far more difficult. It erodes the foundation required for diplomacy to succeed, trust. When world powers sit across from Iranian officials, they come to the table already skeptical. They bring with them not only their own doubts, but the concerns of their allies, the worries of their populations, and the burden of preventing nuclear proliferation. In this environment, every statement made by Iran is dissected and examined under the lens of distrust. Even genuine efforts are viewed as strategic maneuvers, designed not for peace but for delay. That's the power of opacity. It doesn't just hide intentions, it clouds every step forward. Transparency isn't just about letting inspectors walk through facilities. It's about honest dialogue, full disclosure, and a commitment to consistent behavior. When Iran builds facilities in secret or announces advancements in uranium enrichment with no prior warning, it undermines that possibility. It tells the world that it operates by its own rules, regardless of the global consequences. And while national sovereignty is important, when nuclear technology is involved, the stakes are no longer contained within borders. One misstep, one miscalculation, could ripple across the globe. That's why the international community demands openness, not as an intrusion, but as a safeguard. The problem becomes even more complex when internal politics are involved. Within Iran, there are competing factions, some who might favor more openness, others who push for defiance. That internal conflict spills out onto the world stage, where decisions are seen not just as national policy, but as a reflection of who holds power within the country. The uncertainty of who is truly in control adds another layer of doubt. Foreign governments don't just question Iran's nuclear intentions. They question the stability of its leadership, the consistency of its promises, and the durability of any agreement made. Then there's the issue of previous agreements that have broken down. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action JCPOA, for instance, was a landmark deal meant to limit Iran's nuclear capabilities in exchange for sanctions relief. But when trust falters on both sides, when one party walks away and the other ramps up enrichment, the collapse of such a deal only confirms the worst fears. It reinforces the belief that Iran cannot be trusted, that transparency was never the true goal, and that any future agreement would meet the same fate. This cyclical breakdown of trust makes it harder to build anything new. Each failed attempt leaves behind a scar, a warning, a reason to remain suspicious. In this kind of environment, even neutral moves are interpreted through a lens of doubt. A new facility may be for energy, but without full access and verification, it's assumed to be military. A scientific breakthrough may be legitimate, but without transparency, it's considered a threat. This isn't about bias. It's about a world that has learned, often the hard way, that assuming good intentions without proof can be dangerous. When weapons of mass destruction are on the line, the margin for error is non-existent. Transparency is the only real antidote to fear in this context. Without it, suspicion becomes policy, mistrust becomes doctrine, and the world edges closer to confrontation not because of what is known, but because of what is feared. Dual-use technology blurs the line between peace and threat. At the core of the nuclear controversy surrounding Iran lies the reality that the same scientific knowledge, equipment, and materials can serve entirely different purposes depending on intent. The process of enriching uranium, for example, is essential for generating nuclear power, which can provide cleaner energy and support economic growth. But that very same process, if pushed to higher levels of enrichment, can be used to create the core material for nuclear weapon. The centrifuges used to spin and purify uranium do not advertise their purpose. They don't tell observers whether their goal is peaceful development or military escalation. This ambiguity creates unease, particularly when trust is already fragile. This concept of dual use is not unique to Iran, but it becomes especially sensitive when applied in a context of geopolitical tension and historical suspicion. Nations that have demonstrated hostility or unpredictability in their foreign policy are scrutinized more closely, and their access to sensitive technology raises alarm. When a country claims its nuclear program is peaceful, but continues to expand its technological capacity far beyond what is necessary for energy production, it invites questions. Why so many centrifuges? Why continue enrichment beyond the levels needed for a reactor? Why keep certain facilities underground, protected by concrete and steel, out of reach from prying eyes? The world sees these moves not as routine development, but as strategic signals. Even technical terminology becomes part of the controversy. The distinction between 67% uranium enrichment used for power generation and 90% enrichment required for weapons is well known among scientists, but the space in between is where the problem lies. The ability to enrich uranium to low levels is the same ability that enables enrichment to higher weapons grade levels. This proximity between peaceful capacity and military potential is what keeps international leaders awake at night. It's not just about what is being done now, but what could be done tomorrow with the tools already in place. That potential changes the tone of every conversation, and it raises the stakes of every inspection. Furthermore, the infrastructure needed to maintain a nuclear energy program is complex, expensive, and demanding. In many cases, countries that pursue nuclear power openly work with international partners, allow for inspections, and demonstrate a need that aligns with their development goals. When a country like Iran, which is rich in oil and gas reserves, insists on an independent nuclear program despite international pressure, questions emerge about motives. Why choose a path that invites sanctions, isolation, and economic hardship? Why not rely on existing energy sources or cooperate under established global frameworks? The answer is never stated clearly, and in that absence, suspicion grows. The international system is designed to manage nuclear ambiguity through treaties like the Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT), which encourages peaceful use while preventing weapons development. But when a country walks the fine line of compliance, adhering to the letter of the law while violating its spirit, the system struggles to respond. Dual-use technology provides that gray area, allowing nations to assert their rights while quietly advancing capabilities that could be used in more destructive ways. This legal and ethical loophole is part of what makes the Iranian nuclear program so controversial. It isn't always about clear violations. It's about calculated ambiguity. That ambiguity doesn't only affect governments. It influences markets, defense planning, and public opinion around the world. It forces neighboring countries to reconsider their own security measures, sparking debates about missile defense systems, regional alliances, and even preemptive strategies. One nation's claim to nuclear sovereignty becomes another nation's existential threat. The tension that dual-use technology creates doesn't stay contained within borders. It spreads, it compounds, and it destabilizes. When ambiguity becomes the default, paranoia becomes the strategy. Nations arm themselves not based on what they know, but on what they fear might be true. Scientists and engineers may see dual use as a technical term, but in the realm of politics, it's an open door to suspicion. It's the reason why every announcement of new centrifuge development or higher enrichment levels sets off alarms in international institutions. It's why even peaceful advancements are viewed through a lens of doubt. Because when you possess the tools to build a weapon, the assumption, fair or not, is that you might be willing to use them. In this environment, dual-use technology becomes more than a scientific challenge. It becomes a diplomatic weapon in itself. This reality places the burden of proof not just on words, but on consistent, transparent actions. Without clear separation between civilian and military nuclear intentions, without strict limits and thorough verification, the lines remain dangerously blurred. That blurred line is the battleground where treaties are tested, alliances are formed, and peace is negotiated under the shadow of potential catastrophe. Historical tensions magnify current fears and narratives. The controversy over Iran's nuclear program is not born in isolation. It is rooted in a long, complicated history between Iran and the broader international community, especially Western powers. That history has been marked by overthrows, revolutions, wars, sanctions, covert operations, and deeply entrenched mistrust. Every move made in the present is interpreted not simply on its own merit, but through the lens of past betrayals, broken promises, and unresolved grievances. This is why Iran's actions, even when they fall within legal bounds, are so often met with suspicion. The world is not just reacting to centrifuges and enrichment percentages. It is reacting to decades of strained relations and narratives filled with fear, resistance, and power play. The roots go back as far as the mid-20th century, when Iran's democratically elected prime minister was overthrown in a coup supported by foreign intelligence services. That event left a deep scar on Iran's collective memory and seeded a narrative of foreign manipulation and betrayal. From that point onward, many in Iran viewed Western powers not as partners, but as threats to sovereignty and independence. That narrative only hardened with the 1979 Islamic Revolution, when Iran transformed into a theocratic state and took a confrontational stance toward the West. The storming of the U.S. Embassy and the taking of American hostages became defining moments that shaped perceptions on both sides, moments that still echo in today's policy decisions and diplomatic stand-off. The legacy of these events is felt in every negotiation room. When international bodies call for inspections, Iran often sees interference. When sanctions are imposed, they are perceived not as tools of accountability, but as instruments of oppression. And when Iran advances its nuclear program, it does so under a banner of national pride, resistance, and the right to self-determination. This historical backdrop feeds a cycle where every action by one side justifies the suspicions of the other. The world sees a nuclear threat. Iran sees a defense against decades of foreign domination. Both perceptions coexist, making it nearly impossible to find common ground without addressing the weight of history. The psychological burden of this history is immense. It creates a situation where trust is not just low, it is virtually absent. Negotiators don't come to the table with clean slates. They carry decades of hostility on their shoulders. Every clause in a treaty, every delay in implementation, every shift in tone is examined for hidden meanings. This atmosphere prevents even well-intentioned agreements from gaining traction, as each side anticipates betrayal before it occurs. History acts not only as a memory but as a prophecy, dictating that what has gone wrong in the past will go wrong again. That prophecy, once accepted, becomes self-fulfilling. For the global community, this historical baggage complicates every attempt to manage Iran's nuclear aspirations. The fear is not just that Iran might obtain a nuclear weapon, it's that such a development would be the culmination of a long pattern of adversarial behavior. This fear is intensified by the way Iran's leadership frames its nuclear program. Domestic rhetoric often emphasizes resistance to Western pressure, the right to scientific progress, and a rejection of international double standards. When those words are paired with actions that appear to edge closer to weapons capability, the historical context makes it nearly impossible for outside observers to view them as benign. Even within Iran, historical tensions shape internal debates. Reformists and hardliners interpret the country's past differently, and those interpretations influence policy. Reformists may advocate for engagement and transparency, viewing it as a path to legitimacy and economic stability. Hardliners, on the other hand, draw on the historical narrative of betrayal to justify secrecy, defiance, and self-reliance. That internal division reflects the external one, and it often results in inconsistent signals that further erode trust. 1 year, Iran might cooperate with inspectors and reduce enrichment. The next, it might accelerate its program in response to a breakdown in negotiations. To the outside world, this inconsistency seems deceptive, but inside Iran, it is often seen as a necessary response to broken promises and foreign pressure. The weight of this history is not easily lifted. It is embedded in education systems, state media, political speeches, and diplomatic strategy. It shapes not only how decisions are made, but how they are understood. For many nations, history is a backdrop. For Iran, it is the battlefield. This makes progress incredibly difficult because agreements are not simply evaluated on technical terms. They are judged based on historical patterns and ideological narratives. Without a serious reckoning with that past, without acknowledgement of the wounds that still shape present actions, the cycle of suspicion and confrontation is unlikely to break. Regional power shifts could destabilize the Middle East. The development of a nuclear program by any state in this volatile region sends shockwaves far beyond its own borders. Iran's nuclear ambitions are not just a national issue. They are viewed as a direct challenge to the balance of power that has been delicately maintained among its neighbors for decades. In a region already marked by sectarian divides, proxy conflicts, and deep-rooted mistrust, the idea of one state obtaining, or even nearing, the capability to build nuclear weapons threatens to ignite a dangerous new arms race. Regional rivals, particularly countries like Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Gulf states, perceive Iran's potential nuclear capability as an existential concern, not just a political disagreement. Israel has long maintained a policy of nuclear ambiguity, refusing to confirm or deny the possession of nuclear weapons. However, its posture regarding Iran is anything but ambiguous. Israeli leaders have repeatedly stated that they will not allow Iran to become a nuclear-armed state, viewing such a development as an intolerable threat. This has led to covert operations, cyber attacks, and even open discussions of preemptive military strikes. These tensions elevate the risk of miscalculation, where one side might strike first out of fear the other is preparing to act. This scenario would not be a simple bilateral conflict. It would drag the entire region into chaos, drawing in global powers and destabilizing already fragile nations. Saudi Arabia, Iran's chief regional rival, has also signaled that it would not sit idle if Iran were to gain nuclear weapons. The kingdom has hinted at pursuing its own nuclear capabilities under the banner of maintaining strategic parity. This potential domino effect is what worries international observers the most. One nuclear-armed state in the Middle East could quickly become several. In a region where alliances shift rapidly and trust is scarce, the presence of nuclear weapons could turn future political crises into catastrophic military confrontations. The mere perception that Iran is close to acquiring such a capability pushes other nations to reconsider their defense strategies, invest in missile defense systems, and forge new military alliances. Iran's influence is already significant in the region through its support of groups and militias in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. If Tehran were to gain the protective umbrella of nuclear deterrence, it might feel emboldened to expand its influence even more aggressively. The logic of nuclear deterrence assumes that once a state has nuclear weapons, it becomes more cautious, knowing that any conflict could escalate. But in the Middle East's complex network of proxy wars and indirect confrontations, the presence of nuclear capability might instead give one side the confidence to escalate conventional conflicts, believing that nuclear arms provide a shield against retaliation. This perception could lead to greater instability rather than less. Nuclear capability also impacts the political landscape within countries allied with or opposed to Iran. Governments that rely on U.S. security guarantees may begin to question those assurances if they see Washington hesitating or failing to prevent Iran from advancing its program. This uncertainty could lead countries to act independently, developing their own security mechanisms, which could further weaken existing alliances and international structures designed to manage conflict. The erosion of collective security agreements in the region would create a vacuum where suspicion reigns, and diplomacy is replaced by deterrence and militarization. Another layer of complexity is added by economic factors. The Gulf region is vital to the global energy supply, and any military conflict related to Iran's nuclear program would put critical oil infrastructure at risk. Disruption in this sector could lead to global economic shocks, further increasing the stakes for all involved. It's not just the threat of war that worries the international community. It's the ripple effects such a war would generate. Investors pull back, economies contract, and populations suffer long before the first missile is ever launched. The threat of nuclear escalation turns every minor diplomatic incident into a potential trigger point with global consequences. Meanwhile, nations outside the region are forced to choose sides, provide support, or step into mediation roles. This external involvement adds another layer of tension. World powers, already engaged in geopolitical rivalries of their own, often use Middle Eastern conflicts as leverage in broader strategic calculations. The result is a crowded, high-stakes arena where the margin for error is slim and the consequences of failure are immense. Iran's nuclear program, viewed through this lens, becomes more than a technical or scientific endeavor. It becomes a symbol of shifting power, a potential catalyst for widespread regional transformation, and a destabilizing force in one of the most volatile parts of the world. So yes, it's controversial, because when nuclear power enters the room, so does history, fear, pride, and politics. And in that volatile mix, every move matters. This isn't just a debate for experts in suits or generals in strategy room. It's a conversation the world must keep having loudly, clearly, and urgently, because one wrong calculation, and it's not just controversy we'll be talking about, it's consequence. Thank you.